Alright, it's record review time. This time we're only doing one record. We're doing The Who, Tommy, because we need a little time to talk about this classic. It is a classic. Is it The Who's best album? No, I don't think so. I like By Numbers a little bit better. I like The Who Sell Out, Live at Leeds. But this is a phenomenal achievement, this album. And it's one of those that I almost wish it wasn't as good as it was. I almost wish it didn't work. Because this album gets called a rock opera. And it's not a rock opera. It's a musical. It's formatted like a Broadway musical. And I hate Broadway musicals. I think they stink, everything about them. I think maybe they had their place in the 1940s, but I just personally, it's my own personal distaste. If I could issue a fatwa, it would be no more musicals ever on a penalty of beheading. That's just my personal fatwa, though. But this, and it's also, this sort of led to the business of concept rock albums. It's a double album, and I love double albums, but I like the double albums that are a little more just sort of dumps for just create, like a peak of creativity, like the Beatles' White Album, Wu-Tang Forever, Stones' Exile on Main Street. Those are not concepts albums. Those are just double albums that had so much material that they said, fuck it, we're throwing everything on there. This is more in the vein of like what Smashing Pumpkins tried to do with the melancholy and sadness, and what a lot of bands attempt to do, where they say, we want to make a big statement about the world, and it's going to be a double album, you know, and to me, generally, that falls flat on its face. Tommy didn't fall flat. This thing just holds up as a musical. But it's a rock album. Let's get that out of the way. I just listened to this again to do this review, and what really stuck out to me is this: is not just the tunes, the drumming. Keith Moon is so good, and one of the reasons the Who were special is because Townsend's material gave him stuff to really challenge him. Where a drummer like Keith Moon, you know, anything's going to be great and creative and goofy, but Townsend wouldn't say, okay, here's my new song, it's 4/4, let's go. He would say, hey, I got a rock opera, and I'm going to need you to play timpani. And Keith Moon would say, hey, yeah. And then Pete Townsend would say, and plus, if you want to get crazy drunk on whiskey, you know, go ahead, because I'll be right there with you. That's what The Who was all about. There's that spirit in this album. That's how The Who was. Let's get some really highfalutin, heady material, creative, complex material, and then let's get crazy drunk and just play it really loud. That was The Who. That's why The Who worked at their best. But we need to talk about really what Tommy is about. Because if anybody knows it, you know that it's the deaf, dumb, and blind kid can play pinball. And, yeah, a little bit. But, of course, this is a metaphor. But let's just go through it. So, side one. It starts with the overture like any musical. You got the overture coming up where they go through every theme and play bits in the songs, you know, like how any high school musical or any shitbag actual Broadway musical does that. They go through like a preview of all the songs, but this version really rocks. And then the first lines are where he says, you know, Captain Walker didn't come home. His unborn child will never know him. The father died in the war. This is just my interpretation of it. I don't know if this is what it really is. I'm going to give my interpretation of the story of Tommy. So it's interesting that you compare it to The Wall. Roger Waters' big double album, and it's the same theme, where Roger Waters literally didn't know his father because he died in the war, in World War II. You had a whole generation. When you have a big war, obviously, you have a whole generation of kids that grow up without knowing their fathers who died in the war. Yeah, it's great to some degree that you have a war that's relatively successful, I guess, but war is death and bullshit. That's another thing, but it'll destroy a generation, good or bad, whatever your however you might define winning and losing in war. You're going to have a whole generation in a big war that's going to grow out without a father. That's what Pete Townsend was trying to work out on this album. That's what Roger Waters was trying to work out. So Tommy never knew his father, and in the next song, the key thing that happened. So It's a Boy, Mrs. Walker. That's the first song. And then You Didn't See It, You Didn't Hear It. And so it's that first one where it says, I got a feeling 21 is going to be a good year. That's Mrs. Walker and the new husband. And what happens is Tommy sees something. Either, I guess he sees them having sex and he gets scolded for it, or maybe there's some domestic abuse and he gets scolded for it. But what happens basically is the stepfather pretty much puts a curse on him. It says, you didn't see it, you didn't see nothing. You go back to your room, you didn't see anything. But he literally, or not literally, but in terms of the story, he curses him and says, you didn't see it, you didn't hear it. And that's how Tommy, in the story, that's a big psychosomatic major trauma that he has, that why he's deaf, dumb, and blind. So he's growing up now. The Amazing Journey comes up, then Sparks, and so the next two songs are like sort of Tommy's growing up, and they're slowly realizing, this kid is deaf, dumb, and blind. He's something badly wrong with him. And they take him to a doctor. That's why it's kind of an excuse for him to play the blues song, Eyesight to the Blind. So then shit gets really dark in side 2. Here we have side 2. And we have not only cousin Kevin, who is like the school bully, and really mistreats him. And does he molest him? I don't know. But Uncle Ernie molests him. So there's at least one molesting. You might get 2 molestings for the price of 1. Double album, double molesting. And it's probably the worst song on here is when they do Fiddle About, the Uncle Ernie song. It's horrible because this is a high philosophical, spiritual album of a lot of big metaphors, as deep as you're ever going to get in rock music. And then they have Fiddle About, which literally, I'm going to pull your pants down and fiddle about. That's what Uncle Ernie does. That's why it really is out of place on this. I think it's an Entwistle song, John Entwistle, and it's bad. It's goofy. But so Tommy then, we know, can play pinball, which is also a bit goofy. And again, it's not really that pertinent to the big themes that are really going on this album. Because what's really going on is, okay, Tommy's deaf, dumb, and blind. Well, it's about your perceptions of the world. And before you can open your mind to your true potential to accept yourself, to accept your place in the world, accept love, whatever you want to call it. In some degree, you're deaf, dumb, and blind. You can't accept yourself, maybe? I don't know. It's a pretty interesting concept, but it's not, focus on pinball is to really miss that. And then in the story, and the other thing that I think is really interesting about this is that Pete Townsend, I think, is talking to the audience here in the way that he was talking to them on Baba O'Reilly when he was saying, "Oh, it's a teenage wasteland. They're all wasted." Not saying that in a positive way, and not just saying that in that everybody's drunk. Saying that especially this is the Vietnam War going on, and this is a lot of youth energy that could have been used for a positive thing, or could have been negative, or could have been wasted. And that's sort of what his message was maybe this is about more than, getting trashed and going to the rock concert. Maybe you need to really look into yourself, look for something more than just, dig in the tunes, or just, find something more important than that, whether it's a spiritual thing, whether it's your true potential. So, he talks specific on the song Christmas, it's how can he be saved, and I think he's talking to the audience. How can these people, every night you play in front of kids, just come to the show, just want to hear the tunes, and I think this is sort of a message to try to get, look, they're reaching out on the album. They're saying, hey, this is, think for yourself, and dig a little deeper than, just, de-seeding the weed on the inside of the album cover. Maybe try to find something bigger than that. And what the other thing that's really cool about this album, I think, is that doesn't mean, you have to go participate in a local political thing, or it doesn't mean you have to go take a, community college class. Look inside yourself and look into, this is a spiritual sort of thing. You have to find happiness and acceptance of yourself. And if you have, it's a little bit like, I don't know, maybe Freud would dig this album, because it's sort of saying you have to look into your past, if you have traumas, if you have something that's holding you back, you have to face that. That's why there's a song, Look into the Mirror. So to move on with the album, there's The Miracle Cure, Tommy, Can You Hear Me? We know that one. There's a really bad song, Sally Simpson, which I think he sort of gets a girl. Oh, well, there's the Acid Queen, who is the whore, who says she can save him. Then there's Sally Simpson. Ooh, that's just a bad song. It's that's probably, that and Fiddle About are the worst songs, because they're just the cheesiest melodies. I'm Free is a great song. That's one of my favorites on here. It's I'm Free is like a kind of song that would be a Who song outside of Tommy. Because another thing about this album is these songs, we know some of these songs, of course everybody knows, like Pinball Wizard and stuff like that, but they really work better in terms of the whole album. Like Christmas, that song, it should be a part of Tommy. You can't really take that out and put that on the greatest hits. And anyway, you shouldn't ever buy greatest hits. Greatest hits are for little girls. You don't buy greatest hits albums. Grow up, buy a real album, or download it, you know what I mean? But don't participate in music through greatest hits. Fuck that. That's corporate or nonsense. But then it ends. I have one other big problem with this, but I'll say that the ending, of course, comes to a big crescendo with We're Not Gonna Take It. And story-wise, it gets a little bit confusing. Tommy becomes like the leader of a religion, I guess. And the only problem I have with that, I mean, I can dig it, but there's a bit where it goes, and now here's Uncle Ernie. Like all the characters come back at the end. He tries to wrap it up like it's a musical, and it says, "Oh, well, here comes Uncle Ernie to lead you to your, to help you with the holiday camp." And it goes, you go, hold on, Uncle Ernie was the guy who molested him. We don't want Uncle Ernie working as a friendly usher at the camp. So, I mean, Townsend tried to wrap it up with all the characters coming together at the end. Would have preferred Uncle Ernie maybe in a state prison. Maybe that wouldn't have worked as aesthetically for song lyrics. But and then the ending tune, which I've always taken, ultimately, maybe this goes against my earlier idea of something being more than music, but I take it when it says, listening to you, I get the music, following you, I get opinions, I get the heat, listening to you, I get the story. It sort of is describing, to me, music. Like, that's why I listen to The Who, that's why I listen to Wu-Tang, that's why I listen to Grateful Dead, Bob Dylan. I get the story. I get the news, Listening to you, I get opinions. That's where I get my, what life makes sense to me outside of the daily grind that doesn't make sense. So maybe you could find that in religion, maybe you could find that in a guru, maybe you could find that in whatever, but the album is telling you to find something bigger. Reach for something. There's the hand reaching for something there. And it's a personal journey. That's why the deaf, dumb, and blind thing really works, is you don't necessarily have to reach to go pick up garbage or try to change the world. You're never going to change the world, but you can change yourself. Maybe that's a harder thing to do and accept. But this album is so good, and The Who are so badass, and I would recommend, above all, Live at Leeds, the CD version of Live at Leeds. Any live Who really kicks ass. But hey, you can't go wrong with Tommy. So that's my interpretation. God bless the good old Who, and this was Shem the Penn's Record Reviews for Keystone Statement.